Hi, my name's Tom Cornacchia, and I am a father of three. I'm a 46-year resident of the city of Leominster. I'm an educator in the Leominster school system. I'm a homeowner, and I'm also a taxpayer. Today, I'd like to share with you some facts and figures regarding Leominster, both past and present, discuss the budget disaster of 2017, as well as comment or respond to some comments made by the mayor recently on both radio and television. Leominster is a gateway city. What does a gateway city actually mean? According to the Brookings Institute and the Massachusetts Institute for a New Commonwealth, a gateway city is defined by four things: higher than state average unemployment, lower than state average median family income, assets with unrealized potential, so empty buildings and space, as well as underperforming schools. I'd like to talk a little bit about the economic development in the shifting tax burden to Leominster residents. According to the Department of Revenue, Leominster has a tax rate of 19.73, as we'll look at on this chart in a moment, which is the 30th highest tax rate in the state. The chart next to me shows the 10-year history of the tax rate in Leominster. And you can see we start at fiscal year 7 at 10.88, fiscal year 16 at 19.58, and I should actually add this sticky note right here because for fiscal year 17, we are at 19.73, 30th highest in the state. What does that mean to you and your wallet? According to DOR's Division of Local Services, the average single-family home tax bill in Leominster today is $4,565. That is a 47% increase from just 10 years ago. 47% increase affects everyone, especially seniors living on fixed incomes. Also, we have another property tax increase later this year. It's the 15th in a row. At an average of a 1.5% tax increase a year, that is $20 million in new taxes collected in the last 15 years. Let's talk about growth, or the lack of quality growth. Leominster is unique in that it has premier highway access in Northwestern County with I-190 and Route 2. Our economic plan apparently seems to be selling out to low-paying retail service jobs. Essentially, with low-paying retail service jobs, Leominster has ended up with a net zero-sum game in tax revenue. Let me give you an example. The development of Orchard Hill Park, which is a beautiful facility, no doubt, that has taken business and started the decline of the mall at Whitney Field, okay? And perhaps Kmart also, even though Kmart we know is in Fitchburg. So basically a net zero-sum game in tax revenue. We could define it as one new restaurant moves in, and eventually another one goes out of business. Okay. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 42,000 residents living in Leominster. On weekends, we average around 60,000. So 60,000 people in Leominster. That places an additional burden on police and fire departments' budgets and their manpower, as well as their ability to effectively do a thorough job. And they do a very thorough job considering the constraints placed upon them by having an additional 18,000 people in Leominster on weekends. We also have increased traffic congestion. We have an increase in criminal activity, okay? So all this cheap growth, with all this cheap growth, I think the important question to ask is, have your taxes gone down? And the answer is no. Because of a lack of vision to attract businesses that offer good paying quality jobs, there has been minimal growth in tax revenue from businesses. Homeowners, so you, have been carrying the increasing tax burden of the city for many years. Let's talk a little bit about free cash, or what I like to call free cash abuse. What is free cash? Not yet. The definition is actual revenues in excess of revenue estimates and unspent amounts in departmental budgets for the year just ended, plus unspent free cash balances from the previous year. That is according to the DOR from February of 2016. Much of Leominster's free cash comes from dramatically underestimating tax revenues when formulating the city budget. Let's take a look at the chart right here behind me. Okay. This chart right here, which is from the Department of Revenue, Divisions of Local Services, you can see right here we have the motor vehicle excise tax. The actual receipts for 2016 was $4.9 million. We are underestimating motor vehicle excise tax for fiscal year 17. We're underestimating it at the point of $2.7 million. And we see this consistently again and again. The meals tax, we estimate $165,000. The actual amount from fiscal year 16 was $359,000. We estimate $183,000 for penalties and interest on taxes. The actual amount from the previous year, fiscal year 16, is $348,000. So the budget is formulated by using these dramatically underestimated tax receipts. Okay? The differences between estimated tax receipts or revenues and the actual tax receipts does find its way into the budget, and that is what I've referred to as padding the budgets. And most of that money ends up left over in the budget at closeout date and goes into free cash. Okay? The Department of Revenue says that certified free cash totals should be between 3 to 5% of the city's annual budget, and this is considered fiscally responsible. Leominster, however, averages 6 to 8% of our budget, ending up in free cash. This is not fiscally responsible. Let's look at the 10-year certified free cash chart, okay? This graph right here shows from fiscal year 8 up to fiscal year 17, our certified free cash totals. Over those 10 years, we have accumulated or placed into free cash close to $70 million. Fiscal year 17, we put $9.2 million into free cash, okay? So you can see the increase, and these numbers exceed the state recommended 3 to 5% of the city's annual budget going into free cash. These represent 6, 7, 8%, okay? So Leominster averages 6 to 8% of our budget ending up in free cash, okay? Now the Department of Revenue recommends not using free cash for operating expenses. Now the mayor and I completely agree on this. However, if the mayor agrees with the DOR as he claims, then department overtime should not be paid out of free cash. Department overtime should be in the budget. I think the important note here is that any money above the state recommended percentages should not be in free cash in the first place. This is abusing the free cash account. So let's look a little more closely at free cash for fiscal year 17. So this particular column right here. Instead of having 8% of our city's $120 million budget going into free cash, if we had 4% in the middle of the state's recommendation, that would put $4.4 million back into the city budget and still leave $4.8 million in free cash for capital projects, for transferring water and sewer holdings back to those departments. So by being fiscally responsible and stop abusing free cash, we could have put $4.4 million back into the budget to provide basic services to the community, and, this is important, without a tax increase. There is no free cash when we do not have enough police officers on the street. There is no free cash when our fire stations are not adequately staffed. There is no free cash when we do not have competitive schools. Let's talk about the bond rating, or what I like to call the bond rating myth. According to the mayor, we have the second highest bond rating in Worcester County. This is true, but as we'll see on the chart in a moment, 8 other cities and towns in Worcester County also have the same AA2 bond rating according to the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Let's take a look at the Worcester County bond rating chart. So our bond rating is currently a AA2, which is right down here. 8 communities, including Leominster, have a AA2 bond rating. It is not exclusive just to Leominster, okay? 1 community has a better bond rating than Leominster. 19 communities are 1 bond rating lower at AA3, and so on. This is an interesting aspect right here. 20 communities out of the 58, 20 communities in North Worcester County do not even report their bond rating, okay? Many of them are so small they don't have businesses, they don't go to bonds for borrowing. So here's Leominster, along with 7 other communities at our AA2 bond rating. Communities with the same bond rating as Leominster, we have Auburn, Bolton, Grafton, Milford, Shrewsbury, Sterling, and Westboro. And we'll talk a little bit about these later when we get to net school spending. So the important question here is, and we often hear the mayor saying that our bond rating saves us millions in borrowing costs, okay? The chart that we'll look at next is for the Leominster High School renovation project from December 2012. And this information can be found in the city's 2016 annual report, okay? So let's look at this chart right here. So the renovation project from 2012. The city contribution in the interest rate, the city borrowed $14 million at 1.098% interest, okay? The total cost of the project was $45 million. The remainder was provided by the state. So let's look at the numbers below because this is where we see the truth about the bond rating myth. First of all, it's important to note that what determines the interest rate, okay? And the answer to that question is the current interest rate environment. In 2012, you will recall that interest rates were at record lows, 40-year lows because of the Great Recession. So the credit spread, a credit spread is the difference between an AA2 interest rate and an AA3 interest rate. So the credit spread would be relatively small. 0.25% is a little bit generous, but that's what I've pretty much given us here for the sake of math, okay? So let's look at if our bond rating does save us millions in borrowing costs. If we were 1 bond rating lower at an AA3 at a 1.25% interest rate for $14 million, our monthly payment would be $124,170 a month for 120 months, the maturity, the life of the loan. So the total payback on the $14 million would be $14,900,400. Let's go to our better bond rating, a AA2. AA2, 1.098 interest rate on the $14 million borrowed. Monthly payment of $123,242 for the maturity of the bond, 120 months. The total payback would be $14,789,040. So the difference in savings between our AA2 bond rating and a lower bond rating, a AA3, for $14 million over 10 years would be a total of $111,360 a year. So essentially $11,136 a year for 10 years. This is hardly the millions in savings that the mayor so proudly talks about. So the bond rating is essentially, in fact, a myth in saving us millions in borrowing costs. Let's talk a little bit about the stabilization fund in relation to our bond rating. We have $14 million in our stabilization fund with our AA2 bond rating. The 7 other cities that also have a AA2 bond rating averaged $4.8 million in their stabilization fund. So Leominster has 14. The other 7 cities with the same bond rating have an average of $4.8 million. This is from the Department of Revenue's Municipal Data Bank for 2016. So let's think about this here. We can have a AA2 bond rating. We can be fiscally responsible, or we can have a fiscally responsible amount in our stabilization amount and properly fund services. We do not have to sacrifice the city's future in pursuit of a bond rating that will save us roughly $11,000 a year for 10 years, not millions of dollars. Okay? Let's talk a little bit about the budget disaster of 2017 in a little bit more detail. Thank you. And talk about the school crisis. You will recall we've had 200 pink slips go out. We had 96 employees laid off. That was across the board. So that was from custodians, secretaries, paraprofessionals, tutors, both special ed tutors and so forth, and teachers. We had just recently reported 34 teachers resigned, many of them veteran teachers who had been here for a long time, committed to being in Leominster for most of their career. We have reduced course offerings. We have increased class sizes. Extracurricular activities and programs have been reduced. Fees have been increased and, as you will see, expanded. Now, as a parent of 2 students at the high school, and I want you to think about this too, could you imagine your child in a class of 400 in the high school auditorium, or your grandchild in a 1st or 2nd grade class of 35 or 40 even? Could you imagine that? How much learning would actually be going on? We hear a lot about net school spending. So exactly what is net school spending? Net school spending is the least amount of money that a city can invest in its schools and is determined by the state. So it is the entry point in terms of dollars spent for a quality education. It's not a threshold that stands high, it's the entry point, the bare bones minimum that is relatively low. So schools are like a business, and schools are competitive, and they need to attract talent, provide skills so students can compete for college in the workforce. And the significance of net school spending is that it is the one way that we can compare our ability to be competitive. Let's answer the question, how competitive is Leominster, by looking at our school funding chart. Okay? So how competitive is Leominster? We're looking at fiscal year 10 up to fiscal year 2016. And the important number to look at, or 2 important columns to look at here, is Leominster as a percentage of net school spending. You hear the term, how much does Leominster exceed the bare bones minimum net school spending? And we have 100.1, 0.3%, 0.7, 0.3, 0.1, 0.7, 0.4. In fact, for fiscal year 2017, Leominster, with $59,000 above net school spending, exceeded net school spending by 0.1%. The other important column to look at is the last column right here, comparing how competitive the Leominster schools are to other school districts in the state. So the last column here is the percentage of school districts who fund at a higher percentage of net school spending. In 2010, 92% of school districts were funded higher than Leominster. 95% funded higher. 2014 and 15, 95% funded higher than Leominster, 91%. 2016, 93%. I did not include fiscal year 17 on the chart, but I will tell you that for fiscal year 17, 98% of the 319 school districts in the state were better funded than Leominster Public Schools. 98%. This made Leominster the 9th lowest funded school system in the state. Okay? So, being a somewhat active participant in speaking to school committee, the school committee finance committee, as well as the city council numerous times, to me, in my experience, the process is broken. And what I mean by that is that the mayor has been conspicuously absent from school committee budgeting process. In the school committee, the school budget is 60% of the city budget. It's the largest portion of our budget, okay? So the mayor's been absent from this process. He has been absent from school committee meetings. He has been a no-show at school committee finance meetings. He has been absent from city council meetings, okay? So suddenly we have $2 million in miracle money, or what some friends of mine like to call hero money. $2 million in miracle money shows up at the last minute. And this is after putting residents through all of this, right? Through this movie script of creating chaos, pitting neighbor against neighbor, providing this miracle money at the end and looking like the hero. So even after this movie script and putting residents through all of this, parents, school staff members and so forth, our schools are still less competitive, right? We've lost staff members, we've eliminated programs and classes, and we're increasing and expanding fees. The city council was also pinned into a corner. You will recall that they voted 5-4 for the mayor's budget in a very contentious meeting, yet 4 of the 5 yes votes for the mayor's budget stated how unhappy they were with their vote, but voted yes out of fear of having to go into the chaos of a 1/12 budget. So even our city councilors were kind of pinned in the corner, okay? So what we needed was, truly a leader to bring all parties together, right? To put the politics aside, look out for the benefit of the city and the students, and to work cooperatively and to find some common ground, okay? I'd like to take a few moments and comment or discuss the mayor's comments about what I mentioned to the city council, and I'd like to share this document here with you. Can I put this right here? Okay. So this document right here is the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officers Financial Management Review. It's from 2010, okay? And I'm not going to open up the page, but I'll share some of the highlights from you. And the MASBO Financial Operations Review looked at City Hall's working relationship with the school department. And I quote, they found inefficiencies and waste in City Hall's dealings with the school department. One of the particular items of note was, and I'm quoting again from the MASBO report, the city does not use Munis for the financial data of the city. A handwritten ledger is maintained by the comptroller. Now, the mayor recently acknowledged that a handwritten ledger book was used as a backup to Munis, but could you imagine your financial data at your bank or your brokerage house being backed up by a ledger book, or your medical records, your medical data being backed up by a handwritten ledger book? We do have these things today called thumb drives and certainly the cloud. Another important aspect of the MASBO report, and again I'm quoting the report, the Munis system will not allow a requisition to be entered if an account is overspent. So having a fully compliant city, all departments utilizing Munis could prevent overspending of department money. We have had 2 city council resolutions passed in the last 6 years. One was in 2011 based on the MASBO report, okay, the report we just discussed about inefficiencies and waste and so forth, and one last month. Now, both these city council resolutions were asking the mayor to request a DOR review. The city council resolution last month passed unanimously 9-0. Yet again, the mayor seems to be taking a back seat to their requests and to bringing transparency and clarity to our city's financial situation. In fact, in a letter to the City Council on July 24th of 2017, the mayor actually traveled to the Department of Revenue to tell them Leominster will, and I quote from his letter, continue the upgrading and conversion to the Munis accounting system. Both of these will be labor-intensive and time-consuming. So let's think about this. The lack of fully utilizing Munis, of the reentry of financial data, no centralized database, lack of data integrity, okay? I mean, this was brought to City Hall's attention 6 years ago from the Masbo report, and now the mayor is going to the DOR to tell them that we're working on it, but it's going to take a fair amount of time, okay? So, in summary, about what I've talked about, the budget disaster of 2017, okay? I'd like to say that Leominster has had substantial tax increases in the residential area, so your property taxes. We have had poor quality growth to help reduce the residential tax burden. Our quality growth has been on low-paying retail and service jobs. It's important to note, too, that competitive schools are essential in breaking out of our gateway city status. Gateway city status is not a good thing. Remember, higher than state average unemployment, lower than state average family median incomes, underutilized facilities, so land and buildings, and I forget the last one, but that's okay. So competitive, and underperforming schools, thank you. So competitive schools are essential in breaking out of our gateway city status. Good schools attract quality businesses and jobs, which means tax revenue for the city. Investment in schools does not require a tax increase. I would like to say that again. Investment in our schools does not require a tax increase. We can get out of gateway city status without a tax increase. However, it does mean we will have to stop abusing the free cash fund. We'll have to stop the zealous pursuit of a bond rating that is not really saving us millions in borrowing costs, but has unfortunately just become a political talking point. I would like to thank you for watching. I hope I've been able to show some truths behind the curtain at City Hall. I would like to thank Carl, Brandon, Jeff, and everybody here at LTV for having me. And I wish you all a good day and an even better tomorrow. I hope to talk to you soon, and take care. Thank you.